Hey everyone, Cooper here, host of the fine podcast you're listening to. I just want to let you know that the episode you clicked on has a format that is very heavily inspired by a podcast called The Bookening. To be clear, our thoughts and opinions in this episode are our own, but the format is very similar to this podcast. I just wanted to give you a heads up and give credit where it is due. With that out of the way, enjoy the show. Welcome to Booking It. Today's episode will be Tress of the Emerald Sea. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Booking It. I'm of course your eloquent host, Cooper Cobbs, and today I will be doing an awesome solo episode on Brandon Sanderson's Tress of the Emerald Sea. Typically, I have my good friends Bryson, Tanner, and Isaiah joining me, but today it's just going to be me reviewing Tress of the Emerald Sea. We've got some scheduling going on. We have a spring break. I know it's really early, the spring break this week, so we couldn't record all together. I'd read this book. I think it'd be a fun one to do. Someone had asked us to do it as well, so I thought it'd be just a fun little solo episode for me to do as well. So Brandon Sanderson, obviously, very obscure fantasy author. No, it's a joke. He's probably the most prolific and famous fantasy author writing today in the modern world, and this is one of his secret projects. So if you're not familiar, Brandon Sanderson a couple years ago had the biggest Kickstarter of all time, in which he said he had written 4 novels that nobody knew about, and by supporting his Kickstarter, you could get these and a bunch of other things successively. Of course, you could also buy the books not having supported the Kickstarter, and so that's what I did. I bought the book, or actually got it as a gift for my birthday, without having supported the Kickstarter. But this is the first of the secret projects to have been released, and it is probably one of the most well-received. I haven't done a whole lot of research, but people like it, and I'm here today to do a review, and this is going to be a spoiler-free review, so if you are concerned about spoilers or plot points, don't worry. I'm going to give my overall thoughts. I'm going to reveal some stuff about maybe the world building and characters, but not anything that happens later on in the book, anything that's going to be a spoiler, anything like that at all. So please feel free to listen to it all the way through with no apprehension or fear about me spilling the beans. So today, what I'm going to do is really just describe kind of what the book is going for, where it succeeded in that, and where it maybe fell short. Maybe not even just falling short at what it was going for, but also the inherent limitations of what it was trying to do and things like that. But overall thoughts, it's great. It really is. I think that it's fantastic. I think that especially this kind of differs a little bit from what Mr. Sanderson normally tries to do. And if you're not familiar with, the Secret Project story of Mr. Sanderson, I keep calling him Mr. Sanderson. Well, just know that this is probably not the best introductory episode into, who he is and, what he does. In fact, you could probably listen to our old episode on Brandon Sanderson. I think it's 100 and something, or maybe even 98 or something, that we did, is kind of reviewing him and doing an overall episode on his work. But just know that he typically writes epic fantasy, giant worlds, giant magic systems with huge plots and things like that. But this one is much more of a fairy tale, and I loved it. But to kind of get a picture of what he's going for, I think the best way to describe it is it's a modern version of The Princess Bride. Now, he actually makes that connection in the very end of his book. Let's see if I can pull it up here. It's on his acknowledgments at their postscript at the very end. So he said basically during COVID-19, he saw The Princess Bride and watched it with his family, and they really enjoyed it. And so he said that he wanted to write kind of a modern version of a fairy tale. So he said, I didn't want a fairy tale, but something adjacent. However, I also didn't want it to be too childlike. I wanted something my fans would enjoy, a grown-up fairy tale, so to speak. So he kind of describes that the book, The Princess Bride by William Goldman, who also wrote the screenplay for the movie, is basically the closest thing that he was going for. But also, this is what he says about watching the movie. The film holds up wonderfully, of course, though one thing has always bothered me. The princess, who the book and the film are both named after, just doesn't get to do much. My wife Emily noticed the same thing, and mentioned after the film something along the lines of, what if the story had been like if Buttercup had gone searching for Wesley instead of immediately giving him up for dead? And that was my seed. And so that's kind of what the book is kind of conceived around. Basically, Tress goes after her long-lost love, in the Princess Bride sort of fashion. So that's kind of the basic plot structure as well, but also the kind of wit that he's going for. So speaking of wit, the book is told narrated by a character known as Hoyd, who also goes by Wit in one of his series. If you're not familiar with the Cosmere, which is Brandon Sanderson's universe in which most of his novels are in, so it's kind of a connected universe, although it's better than like Marvel or anything like that. So he appears in basically every single one of the Cosmere novels. So he's in the Mistborn series, he's in the Stormlight Archive series, he's in Elantris, he's also in Tress of the Emerald Sea. So at the same time, he is a character in Tress and the one who is telling the story. And so when I've kind of researched, like, okay, what are people saying in terms of criticism of this book? Basically, it either rides or dies on whether or not you like Wit narrating it. So he kind of brings the whimsical nature of it. He's very witty as a narrator and tells a lot of jokes and things like that. But it's very, very much a modern fairy tale in the vein of The Princess Bride, but being told by this very witty narrator. Now, when I say modern Princess Bride, I mean that in a couple different ways. Firstly, in the fact that, like I said earlier, it's not a girl getting the guy, but it's girl trying to get the guy. And it's not like, if you're concerned about it being like feminist or ugly or I don't know, things like that. It's not overly so. Like he's not rubbing it in your face or anything like that. So it's very much not abrasive when it comes to that kind of thing. So in that sense, it's fine. But in the sense that also it's really. I don't know how to describe it, but it's not classical. It's very much in the modern vein of fantasy. Brandon Sanderson is obviously, like I said, the most famous modern-day fantasy author, and he's really done a lot to kind of shape what the genre looks like today in terms of these magic systems, which are more hard magic, which means they're more sciencey. You can understand more. There's less mystery in terms of what these things can do. I mean, there are huge sections of his books which are basically spent just trying to perform scientific experiments on how this magic works. Like the characters and the stories are trying to figure out how the magic works. At the same time, though, in this modern fairy tale, there's a very cool magic system. And so it actually kind of works in that sense, to where we have the old classical fairy tale being told by a narrator, but also a very cool magic system. So I won't give too much away, but the magic system is really involving these things called spores. They come down from the giant moons circling this planet, and they fill basically 12 seas of the planet. And these spores can do different things, but you can sail through them as well. And you can sail through them, but also they're very dangerous. So if they can come into contact with water, you'll basically perform some dangerous thing and you can die. But it's really cool to see descriptions of the ships sailing through the seas. Most of the book takes place on ships sailing through the seas, the spores seas. And the closest thing to imagine is, I think he actually did a video with Mark Rober on this, but if you've ever seen that Mark Rober video where he liquefies sand, that's kind of what it looks like, is liquefying these spores, these giant dust mites kind of thing. But sometimes, the liquefying stops, and so the ships get stuck in all these spores. But the spores also have these magical properties you can manipulate to launch cannons, fire guns, and, basically use magic. So that's a lot of fun in terms of adding some flavor and character to the fairy tale, and it's very much a Sanderson take on a modern fairy tale. Now, I really did love it, though. I think the story is great. You really love all the characters. Like, Tress is actually a really fun character. And let me just read the opening line here. In the middle of the ocean, there was a girl who lived upon a rock. This was not the ocean like the one you have imagined, nor was the rock like the one you have imagined. The girl, however, might be as you have imagined, assuming you imagined her as thoughtful, soft-spoken, and overly fond of collecting cups. And so it really follows Tress as she goes out to save her love, as she basically jumps around on two ships, one ship mainly though. It kind of wins the heart of the whole crew and basically enlists them all to go and save her love while kind of trying to counteract the influence of the evil captain of the ship and some other foes who have entrapped her love and things like that. So it's really, really a lot of fun in terms of just the story. Tress is a great main character, is a great protagonist. She's lovable, likable, and like I said, it kind of follows the typical trope in a good way, though. In a good way, she follows the trope of the person who inspires everyone around them to kind of get lovingly manipulate them, if that makes any sense at all. But the side characters are also a ton of fun, and in terms of in terms of just their flavor, the verve they provide to the story, like they're just really unique in terms of their oddities, but also they're all really likable. Like there's this character who can't speak, but writes on a tablet and has this quirk where he's trying to basically trade things for you, and he just enjoys the trade. He's not trying to, he anytime he offers you a favor or you offer him a favor, he expects it to be met, but it's this cool thing. Anyway, there are other characters who are noble. There's this character who wants to fire cannons on the ship, but can't see at all, and so she keeps missing by miles. It's a ton of fun though. There's also a lovable side character named Huck, who is the main side character. He's a rat, and he's a talking rat though, and provides a lot of fun banter for Tress. The villain is fun in terms of the main overarching villain and the little captain of the ship as well. And of course, Hoyd, who is the narrator, also has an appearance as a character in the story, and he's a lot of fun. Sometimes it can be confusing though if Hoyt is narrating or like being part of the character or being a character in the story at first. So that's a little confusing, but also it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So overall, it's really great. It's a ton of fun. It's a rip-roaring fantasy tale. It's a fairy tale too, but it's told in kind of a modern way in terms of the girl going after the guy, and in terms of the modern fantasy rules being in place instead of kind of the more classical fairy tale version of it. Now, in terms of critiques, I think I just have a couple of critiques. Firstly is if you're going to compare this to The Princess Bride, which I think is fair because he draws the comparison himself, and obviously, like if you read it and you've read The Princess Bride or seen the movie, it's pretty obvious that it's kind of in the same vein. I'd say that one thing The Princess Bride does better than Tress is that it's much better paced. So William Goldman is actually a pretty famous screenwriter. He's written, obviously the screenplay for The Princess Bride, but also the screenplay for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Actually, was that The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, or... I'm sorry, it was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. So he's a pretty famous, actually, Hollywood screenwriter. He's written several screenplays. And so when he wrote The Princess Bride, he's already very experienced in terms of pacing and, getting things done. And so The Princess Bride is like perfectly paced, just the book is, in terms of action happening, in terms of exciting scenes, exciting characters, perfect dialogue, everything like that. But everything moves like so quickly, but you don't feel like you're moving quickly, if that makes sense. You're moving very, very fast, but at the same time, you're enjoying the ride, and you're not feeling rushed. And so when the opening scene, obviously, with Buttercup and Wesley works perfectly. You have the sections where he kind of implants himself as a narrator, making fun of the book he's quote-unquote abridging, even though he's not really abridging it, which is kind of like the shell narrative of the story. But also from Wesley being on the pirate ship to Buttercup being captured by Vizzini and all those people, and then Wesley trying to go save her, and then Wesley getting captured again, and Buttercup in the castle in the climax. All of it is perfectly paced. It's snappy. You're getting there fast. You're enjoying it. When it comes to Tress, I think that it really could have been shorter. Like, it's almost 500 pages long, and it probably could have been a bit shorter. Now, obviously, he's not trying to do a short fairy tale. In fact, The Princess Bride is pretty long in terms of page count, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like a breezy ride. But I think Tress suffers from a little bit of bloating in the middle. In terms of the opening is awesome, just in terms of establishing the characters, establishing the relationship, establishing the world. All of that is done pitch perfect. You love the characters, you buy the relationship, you like it, you buy the magic, you think it's a fun, cool world, and then when the exciting incident happens and Tress needs to go after her love, who disappeared, and has been basically thought to be dead, you buy her trying to go and rescue him. So all that is set up wonderfully. But once like the couple of things happen where she's on her way, that kind of stalls out a bit. She spends 250 pages or maybe even more on this one ship trying to reach her goal. And so we spend a lot of time on that ship because that's really just what happens with the story. Like, we're trying to get to this far off place, and so need to travel there. Now that's good because we establish relationships, the characters you grow to love. You grow to love during that part of the story. You buy the dynamic between her and the evil captain, and her first mate, the captain's first mate, who's also kind of bad. And so that's all good, but we spend a lot of time there, and there's not a lot that happens necessarily in terms of action and plot points. Now, she discovers a lot of things about the magic, she works out plans and things like that, but in terms of pacing, it's kind of slow during that. Now, it's still fun, it's still exciting, it's a very small critique, but in terms of you're comparing it to The Princess Bride, I think that the pacing lacks a little bit. Now, my other critique was near the very end, there are kind of two scenes. One of them is the climax, which happens later. But the other scene is one of the scenes that really the book has been working towards for a long time, and it happens, it's kind of I won't spoil it, but for me, it was kind of underwhelming, and I won't spoil the scene itself, but for me, I read it, and I walked away, and I kept reading, and I thought that something just didn't feel right to me about the scene. I don't know if it was just not satisfying, or if it just didn't feel quite like it had reached the expectation of what the book was going for. And I reread it again before recording on this, and I'm still not sure what about it did it for me. I think that it really was supposed to kind of undermine your expectations about what was going to happen in it, and it was fun in that regard, and it was kind of a battle of words as well. But at the same time, I don't know, it felt too easy for Tress to get what she wanted. It felt, I don't know, like an escape hatch for the author. I don't know if he worked himself into a place and just couldn't quite get out of it. I don't know what it is. And anyway, the scene that I'm talking about just didn't quite do it for me. And it was a scene that we'd been working towards for a long time, like I said. And so it kind of felt underwhelming to me when we kind of reached the payoff of that. Now, the climax, though, Works great. It's a lot of twisting and turning. A lot of threads come together. And if you're familiar with Sanderson, you know that he loves to have these awesome climaxes where all the threads of the story just come together, and it's called the Sanderlanche. So that's pretty funny, and it really works here. It's not as massive as some of the other ones are, but that's fitting because it's a smaller fairy tale story, and so it works quite well. I think the climax is great. But in terms of the other scene, the other big payoff, I'm not sure that it quite worked for me. But anyway, that's just a small critique as well. The other thing that, like I said earlier, kind of either makes you like or not like the story is the narrator. So Whit is the narrator. It has a lot of fun jokes, and let me see if I can just pull up a couple here. Okay, here's a joke as well. He was 6.5 feet tall and had a jaw so straight and made other men question if they were. So that's kind of a joke. That one's kind of more on the dirty side, obviously, but he is a very funny narrator. And he has a lot of funny, witty jokes and sayings, and so it fits very well with the Princess Bride vibe, but also staying true to who the character is as well. So those are pretty fun. Now, my critique comes on the other half of it. So Whit, like I said, is a very fun narrator. I liked it. That way, the story worked for me. People who didn't like the book didn't really like his narration, kind of for the jokes. They kind of graded on them. But towards the end of the book, we kind of moved away from mostly jokes to mostly philosophizing. So also, Whit likes to have these observations about humans, about life, about things like that. He's very meta and breaks the fourth wall. He's referencing things that happened on Earth and pointing out observations about our world as well, like he knows we're on Earth reading a fantasy story. But also, he tends to provide musings about the way the world is, and sometimes these just don't work for me. I'll read two examples. Here's one. Memory is often our only connection to who we used to be. Memories are fossils, the bones left by dead versions of ourselves. More potently, our minds are a hungry audience, craving only the peaks and valleys of experience. The blend erodes, leaving behind the distinctive bits to be remembered again and again. Painful or passionate, surreal or sublime, we cherish those little rocks of peak experience, polishing them with the ever-smoothing touch of recycled proxy living. In doing so, like pagans praying to a sculpted mud figure, we make of our memories the gods, which judge our current lives. So you can kind of see he's trying to provide like amusing, some commentary on the world, on the way things are, on the characters themselves. And sometimes it works. Like there are some examples where it kind of works, but in those examples, really it's more funny than actually true. And so here he's kind of, and part of it is, I'm not really sure if we're supposed to laugh at this because he's obviously waxing poetic. He's going on. But I think really we're supposed to kind of wonder at how profound he's being of like, oh yeah, even though that's kind of funny philosophizing, he's actually right. And here's another example. And this one, I remember being like, okay, this one I just don't think it works for me at all. You might think this is an unfair moral problem to force upon a simple window washer. Tress was a window washer before she left off, by the way. But there's a certain arrogance in that kind of reasoning. A window washer can think, same as anyone else, and their lives are no less complex. And as I've warned you, simple labor often leaves plenty of time for thought. Yes, intellectuals and scholars are paid to think deep thoughts, but those thoughts are often owned by others. It is a great irony that society tends to look down on those who sell their bodies, but not on those who lease out their minds. And so you're kind of supposed to wonder at how profound he's being and how true the observation is. And sometimes, like I said, these work for me. Other times they don't. And especially as we moved on in the story and the pacing kind of slowed down and less action happened, then really these kind of started to grate on me as well. So Whit mostly worked for me, but also other times, it didn't. And so 500 pages is a lot of time to spend with this narrator in terms of that. But yeah. So that's kind of my review. That's my spoiler-free review of Tress of the Emerald Sea. I liked it. I give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. It's very much a modern fairy tale. And so it's part of me, misses the Princess Bride, the classical fairy tale, and kind of the old heroic virtue, kill the dragon, get the girl kind of story, which I enjoy a lot. But also, it's a good story in terms of understanding just like where the modern world is at in terms of storytelling, in terms of like its retroactive take on certain things like the Princess Bride kind of story, like fairy tales. And so it's very much, a commentary too, like I said, on the old version of fairy tailing, on where we're at today with where the genre of fantasy is in terms of magic, in terms of worldview, and things like that. So it's a very informative read as well. So that's kind of what you're going to get. But it's very fun. I enjoy it. The story has a happy ending. It works out in the end, and it's a lot of fun. So that's my review of Tress of the Emerald Sea. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Feel free to send in any thoughts if you'd like me to talk about anything. And obviously, if people want me to, I can do a spoiler-filled review as well. But since none of the other guys have, I'm not really sure like how big beneficial that would be, except it will allow me to get like greater specificity in terms of my critiques, especially with that one scene I'm talking about. So probably not, but if you want me to, I definitely can. So, all right, well, with that, I'm going to read some of our patrons' names. Our patrons have supported us for $5 or more a month over at patreon.com/booknet. And so in reciprocation of our gratitude, I'm going to shout them out. So thank you to Nana, Van Pappy and Wayla, Isaiah's grandparents, Moses and Zara, and Jenny and Uncle Sam, Mr. Mike and Miss Laura, Anna, Emily, Keenan, Howdy, Jenny, or my mom, I should say, Mrs. Hall, Will, and Kara. Thank you all so much for your support. If you'd like to support us, head over there, or you can check out our website at 412podcasting.com, our Instagram at booknetpod to connect with us, to subscribe to our newsletter at our website as well, and yeah, all fun things. So thank you guys for listening to that. I know I talk fast. I apologize, especially when I'm solo. I tend to go at like 188 words per minute, but hey, that means you don't have to listen to your podcasts at 1.5 speed like I do. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that. I really enjoyed reading this book. I enjoy sharing my thoughts with you guys. Feel free to send any comments or feedback. Love to answer and interact with you guys. So until next time, keep on booking.